News of the bizarre case reached a local journalist through a friend who worked at an animal shelter. The story sounded too strange to be real. A horse with dozens of circular holes covering its neck and torso. Yet the eyewitness insisted it was true. Intrigued, the journalist decided to investigate. It was early autumn, and leaves had only begun to show hints of gold and crimson. The journalist drove to a small farm on the outskirts of town, a place known for rehabilitating animals with nowhere else to go. A flicker of apprehension arose with each mile along the gravel road, because while stories of animals in poor condition were common, nothing quite like this had ever crossed anyone's path. Upon arriving at the farm, everything looked serene on the surface. The late afternoon sunlight cast elongated shadows. Quick pause here. If this story's grabbing your interest, tap like and subscribe. It really helps me keep bringing you these tales. And the air smelled of fresh hay. Barn cats wandered between bales of straw, observing visitors with cautious curiosity before darting out of sight. Following the crunch of gravel underfoot, the journalist spotted a tall wooden stable with fading paint, where a middle-aged man named Gary stood at the entrance. Gary greeted the visitor with a wave, then led the way down a row of horse stalls. At the very last enclosure stood a striking brown horse with soft, inquisitive eyes. At first, Maple, her name, as Gary explained, seemed perfectly healthy and well cared for. However, once the journalist approached, the strange lesions came into view. Maple's neck and shoulders were freckled with numerous round holes. Some were barely dime-sized, others large enough to fit 2 fingers through, each revealing an unsettling red and fleshy interior. Gary described how Maple had been discovered wandering by a highway a few days prior. Concerned passers-by noticed the weird circular wounds across her body and alerted the local animal shelter. Gary, who often took in animals requiring extra care, had agreed to keep her temporarily. At first, Maple was jumpy and refused to let anyone approach her. When she finally calmed down enough for an examination, Gary immediately contacted a veterinarian. That decision escalated the situation in a surprising way. According to Gary, the vet arrived, took just one glance at Maple, and promptly dialed 911. "I've never seen anything like this," Gary recalled the vet saying. "This could be dangerous." Curiosity burned in the journalist's mind. Why would a veterinarian call 911 for a horse's condition? Typically, emergency services were reserved for immediate human crisis. It seemed the vet believed Maple's situation posed a larger threat. Within the hour, law enforcement arrived on the farm. Gary could hear the officers asking if this was a case of severe animal cruelty, or if something even more unusual was going on. They photographed Maple's injuries and taped off the area before phoning a second veterinarian, this time from the State Department of Agriculture. The entire farm quickly turned into a small hub of investigation and hushed conversation. The journalist needed more details. From Gary's account, Maple didn't appear contagious, but the sight of her round, raw wounds left people uneasy. It was difficult to imagine what might have inflicted such uniform, clean lesions. The police and veterinarians alike seemed perplexed. Maple herself stood calmly, as though accustomed to the sudden attention, or possibly too weary to resist. With so little initial information, the journalist turned to local ranchers and neighbors for potential clues. One elderly neighbor, Miss Davenport, speculated it might be an exotic fungal infection, even though she had never encountered a case like it. Another neighbor insisted Maple had been subject to a strange experimental procedure. Others whispered about an act of malicious cruelty, suggesting someone used Maple as a form of twisted target practice. However, these holes didn't match bullet wounds, and none of the theories quite fit. Not wanting to leave any stone unturned, the journalist reached out to a biology professor at a regional university. The professor explained that certain parasites can create crater-like sores on animals, but typically not with such precision and certainly not so many uniform circles across such a large area. Although parasitic infections made for an interesting theory, it still didn't feel right. Back at the farm, Maple's story was spreading through social media, with users sharing images and expressing shock or outright disbelief. Some insisted the pictures were faked or digitally manipulated. But Gary, the veterinarians, and the police knew the horse was real. The growing sense of alarm only deepened the mystery. If Maple's condition was genuine, what caused it? The veterinarian who placed the 911 call had now gone silent, leaving everyone to wonder if he suspected a powerful toxin or biohazard that merited immediate official response. Hoping to uncover fresh information, the journalist contacted the two police officers who had arrived at the farm. Both admitted to being stumped. They had initially suspected a disturbing act of abuse, but the lesions lacked the expected signs of trauma from knives or branding irons. Nor did they look like typical lacerations from barbed wire. Their shape was too precise, almost as though someone or something had used a cookie cutter method. Even stranger was how many there were, covering Maple's neck and shoulders in a pattern that seemed random yet methodical. Eventually, a specialized team from the university's veterinary research department joined the investigation. They performed extensive examinations, biopsies, blood tests, and close inspections of Maple's skin. According to Gary, Maple endured these tests with surprising composure, perhaps sensing that these strangers intended to help. For a few tense days, the researchers worked tirelessly, studying tissue samples under microscopes, analyzing infection markers, and looking for chemical compounds or exotic pathogens. Early one morning, Gary phoned the journalist with the first significant breakthrough. The preliminary lab results indicated exposure to a peculiar man-made chemical compound. This substance caused rapid necrosis in discrete spots on Maple's skin. As layers of flesh died and sloughed off, it left behind perfectly round holes. The uniform shape might be tied to how the chemical was applied, perhaps in circular patches, or how it spread along her skin. The discovery was both relieving and horrifying. It explained why the veterinarian had panicked enough to call 911. An unidentified chemical could represent a danger to other animals, or even people, if it were airborne or easily spread. With the new information, law enforcement began asking tougher questions. Was Maple a victim of testing by an unlicensed research group? Had she wandered into a contaminated area? Was there a hidden facility illegally disposing of toxic substances? Though the questions multiplied, having a direction for the investigation was at least a step forward. In the meantime, Maple remained at the farm, surrounded by caretakers who diligently treated her wounds with specialized ointments and bandages. The thorough medical attention provided a slim hope for recovery. The journalist visited Maple one last time before wrapping up the story. The horse was quieter than before, perhaps from the multiple examinations and treatments. Bandages covered the holes, and though the lesions appeared raw, the bleeding had mostly stopped. Caretakers reassured the journalist that Maple was receiving constant attention, including pain management and procedures designed to stimulate tissue growth. Specialists plan to observe her in the coming weeks and months, optimizing her treatment to ensure the best chance at long-term health. As the journalist prepared to leave the farm, thoughts lingered on the strangeness of Maple's ordeal. Was this an act of cruelty or a grave accident? If a compound existed that could burn into an animal's skin in such neat circles, what else might it do? Could it jeopardize the surrounding environment? The local police intended to collaborate with state and possibly federal agencies to uncover the truth. The supply or disposal of such a substance, if unregulated, posed a serious risk. The entire case left the journalist pondering how fragile the illusion of safety can be. Rural settings often carry an expectation of calm and simplicity, yet hidden threats can surface anywhere. Maple's calm demeanor contrasted starkly with her disturbing wounds, a reminder that even in a peaceful field, harm can lie unseen. Whether Maple had accidentally been exposed to chemicals or intentionally targeted, she now stood at the center of a cautionary tale. Although many questions remained unresolved, Maple's condition was at least no longer a puzzle without leads. The hope was that the ongoing investigation would identify the chemical and determine if foul play was involved. Everyone involved, Gary, the researchers, law enforcement, and the journalist, sought closure for the horse who had endured so much. They also wished to prevent any reoccurrence that might harm other animals or people. Even without complete answers, Maple's story will endure as a warning of the unforeseen hazards that lurk in unlikely places. For now, Maple stands in a stall at Gary's farm, receiving care and kindness in place of the fear and pain she must have experienced before. Her wounds tell a shocking tale, one that has galvanized her new caretakers into a steadfast effort to ensure her well-being and to protect others from a similar fate.